Today, I will introduce you to a crime drama thriller film called Law-Abiding Citizen from 2009. Spoiler alert, be cautious and take care. The main character, Clyde, is a skilled craftsman. His daughter follows in his footsteps and makes a bracelet for him, and now she's making one for her mother. One day, Clyde's wife asks him to open the door, but when he does, he is attacked and two burglars enter the house. They tie up Clyde and rob the house. One of the burglars, Darby, tells Clyde that he can't fight fate and stabs him. Darby's accomplice, Rupert, tries to escape but is told to be quiet. Clyde is forced to watch the assault and murder of his wife. Even his young daughter is not spared from this fate. Meanwhile, a career-driven prosecutor named Nick discusses the Clyde case with his colleague. The situation got out of hand because a judge ruled that DNA evidence from the crime scene was inadmissible. Clyde decided to take a plea deal instead of going to trial. Nick meets with Clyde, who gives him notes that he believes could help with the case. However, Nick disregards the notes and informs Clyde that Darby has agreed to testify against Rupert, who will receive the death penalty based on his testimony. Darby will be sentenced to up to 5 years in prison. Clyde, already emotionally scarred, cannot believe it and pleads with Nick not to take the deal, but it's too late. Nick explains that's how the justice system works, and it's not about what you know but what you can prove. Nick's wife is insulted by Darby during the trial, hinting that she might be the next target. After a long day at work, Nick returns home to his wife, Kelly, and to calm his nerves, he talks to his daughter in her mother's belly. 10 years later, Nick's daughter has grown up, but he is still as busy as ever. Once again, he has to miss his daughter's school recital, which upsets Kelly because he is neglecting their daughter's life. On the same day, Rupert is scheduled to be executed by lethal injection, and Nick is present with his coworker, Sarah. Instead of attending his daughter's recital, Nick witnesses the execution. Rupert's last words claim that he wasn't responsible for the murder of Clyde's family, which doesn't sit well with Sarah and Nick. Rupert is injected with 3 drugs in a specific order, but instead of dying painlessly, he experiences extreme pain and dies in agony. The warden explains that they are not responsible for the suffering, as it has never happened before. Later, a police officer hands the prosecutors a bottle with the phrase, "Can't fight fate," written on it. Nick recognizes the phrase, and the police investigate Darby, eventually finding him at his location. Darby receives a mysterious call that reveals personal information about him, making him paranoid. The voice on the call instructs Darby to look out the window, where he sees police approaching. In a panic, Darby fires shots at police cars and then receives another call from the same muffled voice. The voice tells him that if he wants to avoid prison, he must get rid of his gun and head to an abandoned factory. Darby follows the instructions and encounters an officer asleep in his car on the way. He takes the officer's gun and forces him to drive. They arrive at a deserted location, where Darby orders the officer to kneel. However, Darby receives another call and discovers that his rescuer is none other than Clyde himself. Darby tries to shoot Clyde, but the gun is a trap. Instead, he is injected with a paralyzing serum, leaving him conscious but unable to move. In simpler terms, the content is about a man named Darby who is unable to move but can still feel everything. Another man named Clyde restrains Darby in a warehouse and threatens to inflict extreme pain on him. Clyde has prepared to prolong the torture as much as possible. Clyde tells Darby that he understands what it's like to be helpless because he was in a similar situation 10 years ago. Clyde starts recording and begins to dismember Darby. Meanwhile, Nick and Sarah discuss the tampering with lethal injection and Nick believes that Darby is not responsible for it. Later, the police find Darby's dismembered body. They suspect Clyde because he has a motive and owns the warehouse where Darby was found. The police go to Clyde's house and arrest him. In the interrogation room, they have no evidence against Clyde and can only hope for a confession. Nick's daughter receives a recording of what is supposed to be her recital, but it turns out to be footage of Clyde cutting up Darby. Nick confronts Clyde and gets a roundabout confession from him. However, Clyde points out that his words are inadmissible as evidence. Clyde claims it was a setup and that they have no proof. Nick realizes that it's not about what they know, but what they can prove. Clyde offers a full confession in exchange for a bed and Nick's ego gets in the way. Nick's supervisor scolds him for not taking the deal. In court, Nick pleads to deny Clyde bail but the judge is inclined to agree with Clyde. Clyde mocks the judge and is denied bail. In the interrogation room, Clyde admits to sending a tape where good triumphs over evil. He offers one more confession in exchange for a steak and an iPod in prison. He mentions the name Bill Reynolds as his confession, and it is revealed that Bill has been missing for 3 days. Clyde speaks directly to the camera, addressing Nick and informing him that if he wants Bill to stay alive, he must meet Clyde's demands the following day at 1 p.m. The next day, they receive the steak that was delivered to the prison, but it arrives 5 minutes before 1 p.m. The warden decides to double-check the prosecutors when they arrive with the meal, and they end up being 8 minutes late. Despite this, Clyde remains calm and tells them where Bill is located. He also reveals that the 1 p.m. appointment was not for him, but for Bill, so they better hurry. Nick rushes to a helicopter and they fly to the scene, while Clyde listens to his iPod and enjoys the steak with his cellmate who had previously threatened him. They quickly become friends, but it turns out that Clyde was only pretending in order to get the T-bone from the steak. He turns up the music and gives the controller to his cellmate to distract him, and then stabs him in the neck. The guards come to Clyde's cell, and the warden is furious. Meanwhile, Nick has found Bill buried with an oxygen mask, but unfortunately, he is dead. It took them 15 minutes to get there from the prison, so if Clyde had received his lunch on time, Bill would still be alive. Nick receives a message from Sarah informing him that Clyde murdered his cellmate, and the warden is moving him to solitary confinement. Nick visits Clyde in his solitary confinement and questions the purpose of killing all these people. Clyde explains that he wants to hold everyone accountable for their actions. Nick gives Clyde his daughter's bracelet and asks if his family would be proud of him for seeking vengeance in their name, but Clyde reveals that his wife and daughter can't feel anything because they are dead. Nick and Jonas meet a government official who provides more information about Clyde. He explains that Clyde is a skilled tactician who can kill people without being in the same room as them. If Clyde is in prison, it means he wanted to be there. The cellmate he killed was not random, he was a pawn that Clyde removed from the board. The official suggests that they look for the next piece. He also tells Nick that the only way to stop Clyde is to go into his cell and shoot him in the head because otherwise, he cannot be stopped. Clyde is targeting everyone involved in his family's case. As the official leaves, he warns Nick that if Clyde wants him dead, he will be dead. Nick and Jonas approach the judge and request to violate Clyde's civil rights and restrict visitation to ensure everyone's safety. The judge agrees and signs the document, but her cell phone suddenly explodes when she answers a call. Nick visits Clyde in an interrogation room at the prison and questions him about his accomplice and the purpose of his revenge. Clyde becomes angry because Nick still doesn't understand. If he wanted revenge, he would have killed his family years ago. Clyde gives Nick one last chance to release him by 6 a.m., or else everyone will die. Clyde is then escorted to maximum solitary confinement by several guards. Nick and Sarah search through documents at a prison to find clues about who is helping Clyde from the outside, but they have no luck. Sarah begins to doubt if their decision to make a deal with Derby was the right choice, but Nick assures her that it was. Nick sends everyone home to rest at 6 a.m., but when Sarah starts her car, it explodes along with the other cars, killing everyone. Since Clyde is still in prison, Nick is certain that someone is helping him. 6 officers have been killed. Nick and Jonas meet with the mayor, who is shocked that one arrested man could cause so much damage. She appoints them as security guards. Nick sends his family to a safe place and refers to it as a vacation, ensuring they have no credit cards or cell phones that could reveal their location. When Nick returns inside, he notices a framed newspaper article, indicating that someone has been in his house. Back at the prison, Clyde is allowed to go for a walk and is confronted by Nick and the detective. Out of anger, Nick beats Clyde, who remarks that it's good that Nick is angry because he's just getting started. The detective pulls out a gun, but Nick stops him. Clyde warns Nick that what he is about to witness will be biblical at Sarah's funeral. Jonas believes they brought this upon themselves, but Nick still believes they did the right thing, although he is starting to doubt himself. Meanwhile, a man in black clothing controls a military drone armed with a machine gun, EMP, and rocket launcher. The man disables their cars, and they come to a stop. Jonas' car is hit with anti-tank rounds and is blown up to ensure Jonas is dead. The mayor cannot believe that Nick let this go on for so long. She wants to fire him, but to reduce media pressure, she appoints him as the new district attorney. The mayor issues an emergency order to lock down the entire city, prohibiting unrestricted movement. In the city, Nick receives an email from Sarah's contact, which provides information about real estate that Clyde purchased. Nick discovers that Clyde owns a small garage near the prison. He and the detective meet to inspect the garage and discover a hole in the floor. This hole is actually a tunnel that Clyde Doug had built, which goes directly under the prison. Clyde had created an entrance into every single cell, which is why he killed his cellmate. This was his plan all along. The detective checks Clyde's cell, but he is not there. Disguised as a janitor, Clyde manages to bypass security and enter City Hall through a light. The detective and Nick find Clyde through the cameras that are everywhere, including Nick's house. They also find a quote from von Clausewitz about the center of gravity, which in this case is City Hall. Clyde plants a napalm bomb to kill Mayor, who will soon hold a security meeting. The detective and Nick arrive soon after as a precaution, and they must proceed quietly. To avoid alerting Clyde that they are onto him, they notice Clyde's card on the 5th floor, just below the conference room. They find a suitcase, which they suspect contains the bomb. The bomb squad opens the suitcase and confirms that the bomb is activated by a cell phone and could detonate at any moment. Some agents are assigned to monitor Clyde's warehouse and notify Nick when they see him arrive. Clyde goes to his equipment in the tunnel and watches as the meeting begins. He grabs his cell phone and climbs back to his cell. Clyde is startled by Nick, who has a gun and asks Clyde to do the right thing and give him a way out. Clyde asks if Nick is here to make one last deal. Nick says he has finally understood what Clyde has been trying to tell him all along: he does not make deals with murderers. Nick urges Clyde not to do it, as it is a decision he will have to live with for the rest of his life. Clyde apologizes and calls the number. Nick leaves and reveals that by the rest of his life, Clyde meant about 25 seconds, as the detective locks the tunnel door. Nick has placed the bomb suitcase under Clyde's bed. Clyde looks at his daughter's bracelet one last time before his cell bursts into flames and explodes. The end. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this.